Mark Wojcik, who is a mechanic and a monster hunter, and has a lot of adventures doing that, and I'm going to start with that. So this is from Spell, Salt, and Steel, and Open Season, the sequel, is coming out very, very shortly. When all else fails, the ass end of a carp makes a damn fine weapon. I'd been lying in wait for the ninja to show up, and by the wee hours of the morning I was tired and cranky and out of coffee. As soon as the sun went down, I pulled into the Linesville, Pennsylvania spillway. The tourists were gone, the concession stand's gates were closed. Still blows my mind how many people will come look at a bunch of fish, even if those fish are a boiling, writhing mass of 3-foot-long, 20-pound carp that look like something out of a biblical play. I'm Mark Wojcik, mechanic and monster hunter. I gank things that go bump in the night, so most people never have to know the supernatural uglies exist outside of bad horror movies. No one chooses this life, it chooses you, usually in a violent and awful way. In my case, a deer hunt turned into a Wendigo hunting us. I survived, barely, but my father, brother, uncle, and cousin didn't. Neither did the Wendigo when I was done with it. The carp weren't my problem. Tourists loved throwing day-old bread into the water to watch the carp roil over each other, mouths gaping. Tonight, they weren't the only ones with an unnatural interest in big fish. A corpse-pale creature balanced on the low concrete rim of the spillway catch basin. It stood about 5 feet tall, slender with long arms, and a body that looked like a giant white tadpole with arms and skinny short legs. Ninjin can get as big as 60 feet, or so the cryptid sites say. But then again, they say that ninjin are only found in Japan, so I don't put much stock in them. Koko ni sakana no keo ga karu, I called to it, betting that a Japanese monster might understand Japanese. Then again, I'd looked up key phrases on Google Translate, so God only knows what I actually said. Come here, fish face, I repeated in English, in case the ninjin was bilingual. The ninjin cocked its round head and blinked its solid black eyes. I leaned over the railing and waved my bait at it, a nice piece of salmon I'd paid $15 for at the supermarket, thinking the creature might want an upgrade. That's it, I coaxed, dangling the prime wild salmon and giving it a shake. That's a good little sakana ni neko. That's the magic of translation. Fishfucker sounds classier in a foreign language. If the ninjin felt offended, it didn't look it, although for all I knew, maybe I'd been descriptive instead of insulting. The ninjin raised its head and opened its mouth, scenting the air. It shuffled toward me on its stubby legs like it had its pants down around its knees. I grinned, keeping my sharpened iron harpoon blade concealed behind my back in my right hand. At the speed the ninjin hop-walked, it might take 10 minutes to get to me, but once I ganked him, I'd be home relaxing with a nice cold beer. That's when the damn thing leapt into the air like a horny salmon going to spawn and grabbed the fillet in my hand so hard he pulled me over the fence and into the carp-filled water. I lost the piece of fish, but managed to keep the harpoon. When I fell in, fully clothed and in my steel-toed boots, I thought I'd sink, but I fell on the roiling carp that made a moving, lumpy net beneath me. They buoyed me along just long enough for me to regain my wits and scramble onto the small stretch of rocky shore between the overflow basin and the wall below the fence. The ninjin crouched, eyeing me as it shoved the raw salmon into its mouth, and I got a look at its jagged, sharp teeth, something else the cryptid reports have been less than accurate about. I realized then that the small strip of land around me was covered with fish bones. Those all-black eyes kept staring at me, and although I'd heard long pig taste like chicken, this jagoff looked like he was wondering how much I'd taste like fish. It sprang for me, and I rolled, gritting my teeth as the sharp stones and fish bones jabbed through my jacket and jeans. I brought up my harpoon gun and got off a shot. The barbed iron blade hit the ninjin in the shoulder instead of the chest like I'd hoped, but it must have hurt like a mother, since the thing let out an ungodly howl that would have put any loon to shame. I yanked on the rope attached to the base of the blade with all my might. The ninjin stumbled toward me. Then it grabbed the rope and pulled, and I found myself face down in the water getting smacked in the head by carp the size of toddlers. I scrambled back onto the rocky bank. What little I could find about ninjin, that was written in English, said it would have less power on land. I yanked the rope again, getting angry now, and the ninjin bared its barracuda teeth at me and gave another ear-splitting shriek. The iron had an effect on it. I could see black veins radiating from where the blade lodged in its shoulder, spreading across the once perfect white skin. I just didn't know how long the iron blade would take to kill the creature, or if it would do the job completely. My gun was safe and dry in my truck, since I'd figured going for a forced swim was likely. But I had a few more tricks up my soggy sleeves. The Ninja closed in on me and I grabbed a kata, one of those martial arts sickle blades, from a scabbard on my back. I didn't know if Japanese weapons were extra lethal on Japanese monsters, but I fully intended to go ninja on its ass for leaving me soggy and freezing and smelling like carp. "Let's see you, Shine, you piece of fish shit," I muttered. I watched as much anime as my Crunchyroll subscription could handle, and I picked up a few overused phrases. Die seemed like a good one. Except that the Ninja didn't seem to take it the way I'd intended and jerked me back into the water. I managed to roll, so I got the kata blade between us and swung as hard as I could, sinking the point of the curved blade into its chest where I hoped its heart would be. The black veins from the iron blade had spread across its entire torso, up its fish belly white neck, and down its overly long arms. But it wasn't dead yet, and it came at me again, forcing me to fall backward in the water into another massive carp. I kicked with my legs to get some distance between myself and the Ninja. The carp weren't too pleased to have me land on them, and one of the fish jumped out of the water and landed in my arms, all 30 pounds of him. Instinct took over, and I wrapped both arms around the carp's middle and thrust its powerful tail toward the Ninja. The fish wriggled wildly in my grip, its tail slapping back and forth with sharp scales and fins. It knocked the harpoon deeper into the Ninja's chest as the black lacework of the iron's poison spread across the rest of its skin. I got my feet under me and dragged myself onto the shore, still holding a pissed-off carp between me and the monster. The Ninja lurched forward, grabbing for me with its long skeletal arms and clammy dead white hands. Then it fell over and lay face down among the carp, completely covered by the deadly pattern of the iron's taint running through its veins. "Tora, that fish fucker," I muttered. I dropped the carp and it disappeared into the roiling mass of its companions. I hauled myself back up the rocky shore and caught my breath. The night was warm, but that's a relative statement in this neck of northwestern Pennsylvania, and I started to shiver. The Ninja lay where it fell, and just as I was about to pull it out of the water, I saw its body twitch. "Oh, no, you don't," I growled, but before I could climb up the wall to get my gun out of the truck, the carp began to thrash. My stomach turned as I realized that the Ninja wasn't moving on its own. Its body jerked and moved because dozens of carp were nibbling on its flesh. In the next moment, the Ninja's form sank lower, pulled down by the fish. The pale body vanished beneath the water, and the fish fought for each other to get closer, obscuring it from view. "Hey, buddy, no fishing!" I turned and got a face full of flashlight beam blinding me. The perfect end to a lousy evening would be getting arrested for monstercide. Or, in this case, fishing without a license. "Oh, it's you, Mark." I blinked and recognized a familiar voice. Louis Marino, a guy I'd known since first grade and one of Linesville's finest. "Not fishing, Louis. Honest, just business." Louis is one of the few area cops who know what I really do. He gets it, mainly because when he had a nasty little infestation of demon-possessed rabid raccoons a few years back, I took care of it for him, no questions asked. "Keeping busy?" he asked, angling the flashlight so I could see again. "Always. They pay you enough to be on fish patrol at this hour?" Louis shrugged. "Working nights this week." Drew the short straw. "Just another day in paradise." He wrinkled his nose. "You stink like carp." "I've heard of swimming with the fishes, just didn't intend to take it literally," I replied, wringing out the water from the hem of my flannel shirt. "Do I want to know?" I shook my head. "Probably not. If the rangers at the spillway say anything about the fish count being down, tell them it's been taken care of." Louis grinned, taking in my utterly disreputable condition. "You're just lucky I was on duty tonight, or you'd be going from the fish tank to the drunk tank." "Ha ha, very funny," I mumbled, although I knew he was right. "Oh, and Louis," I said as we headed back to our vehicles, "if I were you, I wouldn't eat any carp out of the lake this season. I think their diet's been a little off." So that's the first of his adventures in Spell, Salt, and Steel. He goes on to, fight the ghost of a Nazi sniper who is at an abandoned TNT plant. A pissed off mafia witch, and several other bad nasties. Now, the thing that's really fun about this series is not only do I get to swear a lot and drop the F-bomb, because it's a tie-in to the Bubba the Monster Hunter series by Hartness, and he's a bad influence. But it is set in my neck of the woods where I come from. So this Linesville spillway of which I talk, I have video on my camera showing water that you can't see anything but carp boiling over each other. All the places in here are real, and many of the legends are real as well. So that TNT plant, absolutely true. And the Nazi sniper, story a friend of mine's father told me from when he was guarding the plant during World War II. So it's kind of fun getting to come home in a whole different way. So that's Spell, Salt, and Steel, the Mark Wojcik Monster Hunter series. I'm going to go from modern monsters to long ago monsters, and this is the Darkhurst series. The first book, Scourge, just came out in April of last year. Vengeance, the second book, will be coming out in April of this year, and this is Medieval Monster Hunters. So hang on for the ride. A heavy iron candle holder slammed against the wall, just missing Corin Valmont's head. Son of a bitch. Try not to make her mad, Corin. Regan Valmont knelt on the worn floor, drawing a sigil in charcoal, moving as quickly as he dared. Not quickly enough. A piece of firewood spun from the hearth and flew across the room, slamming him in the shoulder hard enough to make him grunt in pain. Keep her off me, he snapped, repairing the smudge in the soot line. Sloppy symbols meant sloppy magic, and that could get someone killed. I would if I could see her. Corin stepped away from the wall, raising his iron sword, putting himself between the fireplace and his brother. His breath misted in the unnaturally cold room, and moisture condensed on the wavy glass of the only window. Watch where you step. Regan worked on the second sigil, widdershins from the soot marking, this one daubed in ochre. I don't want to have to do this again. A small ceramic bowl careened from the mantel, and for an instant, Regan glimpsed a young woman in a blood-soaked dress, one hand clutching her heavily pregnant belly. The other hand slipped right through the bowl, even as the dish hurtled at Regan's head. Regan dove to one side and the bowl smashed against the opposite wall. At the same time, Corin's sword slashed down through the specter. A howl of rage filled the air as the ghost dissipated. You have no right to be in my home, the dead woman's voice echoed in Regan's mind. Get out of my head. You're a confessor. Hear me. Not while you're trying to kill my brother. You'd better hurry, Corin slowly turned, watching for the ghost. I can't rush the ritual. Regan tried to shut out the ghost's voice, focusing on the complex chalk sigil. He reached into a pouch and drew a thin curved line of salt, aconite, and powdered amanita, connecting the first sigil to the second and the second to the third and fourth, working his way to drawing a complete warded circle. The ghost materialized without warning on the other side of the line, thrusting a thin arm toward Regan. Her long fingers crabbed into claws, old blood beneath her torn nails. She opened a gash on Regan's cheek as he stumbled backward, grabbed a handful of the salt mixture and threw it. The apparition vanished with a wail. Corin! Regan's warning came a breath too late as the ghost appeared right behind his brother and took a swipe with her sharp, filthy nails, clawing Corin's left shoulder. He wronged me. He let me die. Let my baby die. The voice shrieked in Regan's mind. Draw the damn sigil, Corin yelled. I'll handle her. He wheeled, and before the blood-smeared ghost could strike again, the tip of his iron blade caught her in the chest. Her image dissipated like smoke, and a shriek that echoed from the walls. Avenge me! Sorry, lady, Regan thought as he reached for a pot of pigment. I'm stuck listening to dead people's dirty little secrets and last regrets, but I just bury people. Take your complaints up with the gods. Last one, Regan marked the rune in blue woad. The condensation on the window turned to frost, and he shivered. The ghost flickered, insubstantial, but still identifiable as the young woman who had died, bringing her stillborn child into the world. Her blood still stained the floor of the center of the warded circle and held her to this world as surely as her grief. Wind whipped through the room and would have scattered the salt and aconite line if Regan had not daubed the mixture onto the floor in paste. Fragments of the broken bowl scythed through the air. The iron candle holder sailed across the room. Corin dodged it again, and a shard caught the side of his brother's head, opening a cut on Regan's scalp, sending a warm rush of blood down the side of his face. The ghost raged on, her anger and grief whipping the air into a whirlwind. I will not leave without justice for myself and my son. You don't really have any choice about it, Regan replied silently and stepped across the warding, careful not to smudge the lines, pulling an iron knife from his belt. He nodded to Corin, and together their voices rose as they chanted the burial rite, harmonizing out of long practice, the words of the old language as familiar as their own names. The ghostly woman's image flickered again, solid enough now that Regan could see the streaks of blood on her pale arms and make out the pattern of her dress. She appeared right next to him, close enough that his shoulder bumped against her chest and her mouth brushed his ear. "'Twas not nature that killed me. My faithless husband let us bleed because he thought the child was not his own." The ghost vanished, compelled to reappear in the center of the circle, standing on the blood-stained floor. Regan extended his trembling right hand and called to the magic, drawing on the old familiar currents of power. The circle and runes flared with light. The sigil burned in red, white, blue, and black, and the salt aconite lines a golden glow between them. Corin and Regan's voices rose as the glow grew steadily brighter, and the ghost raged all the harder against the power that held her, thinning the line between this world and the next, opening a door and forcing her through it. One heartbeat she was present, in the next she was gone, though her screams continued to echo. Regan and Corin kept on chanting, finishing the rite as the circle's glow faded and the sigils dulled to mere pigment once more. Regan lowered his palm and dispelled the magic, then blew out a deep breath. That was not supposed to happen. Corin's scowl deepened as he looked around the room, taking in the shattered bowl and the dented candle holder. He flinched, noticing Regan's wounds now that the immediate danger had passed. "You're hurt." Regan shrugged. "Not as bad as you are." He wiped blood from his face with his sleeve, then bent to gather the ritual materials. "She confessed to you?" Corin bent to help his brother, wincing at the movement. "Yeah, and she had her reasons," Regan replied. He looked at Corin, frowning at the blood that soaked his shirt. "We need to wash and bind your wounds when we get back to the shop. Let's get out of here." They packed up their gear, but Corin did not sheathe his iron sword until they were ready to step outside. A small crowd had gathered, no doubt drawn by the shrieks and thuds and the flares of light through the cracked, dirty window. "Nothing to see here," Corin said, exhaustion clear in his voice. "We're just the undertakers." Thank you. So that is from Scourge. It's the first book in the Darkhurst series. Vengeance, the second book, will be out in April of this year. And it is three Undertaker brothers who fight the monsters that are killing their family and friends, only to discover that there's a much bigger conspiracy and they are in way over their heads. So that's and this one is where Spell, Salt, and Steel is comedic horror, and there are a lot of laughs in it. This one was voted grimdark as fuck. So just know what you're getting into. In fact, I've been invited to do a short story for a David Gemmell tribute anthology for a UK publisher, and I'll be doing a story set in this world for that because it seemed to be appropriately dark. Which is kind of fun. I'm having a lot of fun doing a number of series that are very different pacing and tone and time period, so it keeps everything switched up. This one is from a Storm and Fury short story, Resurrection Day. This is set in our Iron and Blood universe, and that is a steampunk series that I co-write with my husband, Larry N. Martin. And we actually have a collection of all of these short stories and novellas to date coming out later this spring called Storm and Fury. But this one is Resurrection Day. And they're, the nice thing about paper books is you don't have to wait for them to load. All right. Damn grave robbers. Agent Mitch Storm stood looking down into an empty hole. The mortuary safe, a latticework of iron bars designed to keep out body thieves, had been pried open like the rib cage of an autopsy victim. An expensive maple coffin had been torn into with enough force that its lid lay separate from its base. The tufted satin interior was empty. "You don't think it could be premature burial?" Mitch mused. He pointed to a nearby tomb with a bell and a rod. Inside, a cord went down to the corpse in the casket, just in case the dearly departed hadn't actually been dead and gone. Similar bells dotted the cemetery between the carved urns and elaborate angels. "Nah," Jacob replied. "No one calls in federal agents for that. At least, it's pretty clear that someone was trying to get in instead of getting out." Agent Jacob Drangasavich, Storm's partner, swept his gaze across the rolling hills of New Pittsburgh's Allegheny Cemetery as if he expected to spot the resurrectionists making off with their prize. "How do you figure?" Mitch asked. Jacob nodded toward the lid, which lay upturned a few feet away from the casket. No evidence of scratching against the lining. An outward-bound force wouldn't have taken off the lid so neatly. "You've seen what it looks like when they rise on their own. I don't care whether they're ghouls, vampires, or wraiths. They make a mess of it." Jacob Drangasavich and Mitch Storm were a study in contrast. Their badges from the Department of Supernatural Investigation were one of the few things they had in common. Storm was shorter, with an athlete's build. He had dark hair and dark eyes, along with a 5 o'clock shadow that started at 3. Mitch still had the cocky assurance that made him one of the Army's best sharpshooters, along with the rules are for other people attitude that continued to get him into trouble. Jacob, on the other hand, was tall and blond, blue-eyed, with Eastern European features that let him fit in easily among the new immigrants working in the city's mines and mills. And although Jacob favored deliberation before action, somehow his caution did not seem to keep the pair out of trouble. "Question is," Jacob said, "who's the body snatcher? Now why do the snatchers want corpses?" "It's not the medical students this time," Mitch said. "They finally got legitimate ways to study stiffs." Jacob was about to reply when he heard a clockwork click and hum. "Get down," he yelled, diving to the ground as a shot rang out. He scrambled to his feet, but Mitch was nowhere to be seen. Jacob's gun was ready in his hand, and he ran for a copse of trees where the shot had originated. "Federal agents, come out with your hands up," he shouted. A figure darted from behind the trees. It looked human, but moved all wrong. Metal glinted in the sun from places on the figure's form, and Jacob heard a click and whine of meshing gears. It was dressed like a man, but it moved stiffly, without the grace of a real person. Whatever it was, it moved fast, Jacob thought, sprinting after it. "Halt! Police!" he shouted again. He put on a burst of speed, but the attacker paused long enough to squeeze off another shot that sent Jacob dodging, then took off again at full run. The stranger was too far ahead of him to catch, and running for one of the carriage roads. Jacob's long legs carried him quickly over the uneven terrain of the old cemetery, but the shooter was faster. Jacob's lungs burned, and he knew he would tire long before he reached the carriage road. Catching up with their attacker was not going to happen. The hiss and thump of an engine sounded behind Jacob, and Mitch let out a whoop as he roared by on one of the department's experimental steam bikes. "Be careful with that thing," Jacob shouted, but by that time Mitch was too far ahead to hear him. Mitch rode the bike like he was jumping hurdles with a stallion. The cemetery's rolling terrain gave him just what he needed to send the bike airborne, vaulting over several granite headstones and barely missing the wings on a mourning angel sculpture. The bike came down hard, but Mitch stayed with it, pulling it out of a slough and barely remaining upright. He gunned the engine, and it popped and hissed in protest, but the bike took off again, with Mitch weaving between and around the stone obelisks, intent on his quarry. The shooter was fast, but Mitch's bike was faster, and the gap between the two narrowed. The runner veered left, and Mitch cut off the corner to intercept. The distance between them went from yards to mere feet. Mitch steered straight for the runner, closing in, intending to run the assassin down. A muffled explosion echoed off the field of monuments and mausoleums with a sickening wet thud. The runner exploded just a few feet in front of Mitch's bike, sending a rain of skin, hair, bone, and clothing falling through the air. Mitch skidded to a stop, covered in gore, staring in complete horror at the spot where the would-be assassin had detonated. Jacob jogged up a few minutes later, winded and sweating. What the hell just happened? Mitch, for once, was speechless. "I almost had him," he said, staring at the burned patch of ground where the bomb had gone off. "And then he just... boom!" "You're sure it was a man?" Jacob tried to catch his breath and wrinkled his nose at the distinctly unpleasant smell. "It looked like a man," Mitch replied, "but he didn't move like one. It was jerky and awkward and way too fast. There was something really strange about him." Jacob frowned and moved into the blast range, sniffing the air, and then kneeling to look closer at the chunks of flesh that littered the grass. "There's no blood." "What do you mean there's no blood?" Mitch demanded. "Didn't you see him blow up right in front of me? How can there not be blood?" Jacob shook his head. "I don't know, but there isn't. Look," he said, pointing. "I think we've answered one question, why the mystery man moved strangely. He was already dead." "You saw him run. He shot at us." "Dead men don't do that," Mitch argued. Jacob pointed at the spray of gore. "Look at the flesh, Mitch. It's not bleeding. It's not the right color. Smell the air. Formaldehyde and rotting meat." He gestured toward some brass bits that caught the sunlight and shimmered. Bits of metal. Where did they come from? They had to be in with the skin and bones. Mitch sat back on his steam bike with a worried look. "You think someone finally managed to do it? Create a clockwork creature?" Jacob spread his hands and shook his head. "More like clockwork abomination. I don't know much about that kind of thing, but I can think of someone who might." So that is Resurrection Day, and that is one of the Storm and Fury adventures. You can get it on its own on Kindle, Kobo, and Nook, or you can find it in the upcoming Storm and Fury Adventures collection, which will have all of the short fiction set in that world of Iron and Blood. While we're doing steampunk, this is a little different. This is from the Gaslight and Grimm anthology. And Gaslight and Grimm is a retelling of classic fairy tales with a steampunk twist. So this is from our story in that anthology, which I have at our table at the vendor room, and it's called The Patented Troll. Once upon a time, in a world of gears and steam, there lived an inventor. Now this was no ordinary dreamer. This was an inventor of clockwork creatures so amazing that they could learn tasks and follow orders. He developed all kinds of mechanical wonders, each more ambitious than the last, all beyond the limits of what others had considered possible. The brilliant inventor's fame grew, and people came from all around the world to see his amazing creations. Some of his clockwork creatures had the shape of men, but they could work for days at a time and never required sleep or food. Others resembled dogs, but the steel and steam dogs could hunt for a week and never lose the scent of their quarry. His iron horses were a wonder to behold, powerful and regal, stallions that could run as fast as a train. Audiences swooned at the beauty of his mechanical falcons and aluminum eagles, with cameras for eyes that beheld the world beneath them. But all too soon, the inventor came to the attention of those who could not appreciate his clockwork creatures for their elegant beauty, and saw in them only a means to create profit and inflict pain. "Sell us your fantastic creatures," the men from the army said to the inventor. "We will make you a hero. Your steel dogs will run enemy soldiers to ground, and your iron horses will trample the enemy under their hooves. Sell us your amazing inventions," the men who ran the factories said to the inventor. "We will make you rich. Armies of your mechanical men will run our factories, men that require no pay and no sleep, who never feel pain and cannot die, and we will work them until they fall apart." "Sell us your clockwork monsters," the criminals said. "You will be powerful. With control of such creatures, we can best our rivals and eliminate anyone who stands in our way. We will rule the world." Now, the inventor had never imagined such horrors when he created his mechanical wonders. He had a brilliant mind, but he was childlike when it came to the darkness of the human heart. When he saw what others wanted to do with his creations, he refused their offers in horror. "I will never sell my fabulous animals and mechanical men to help you kill, enslave, and destroy," the inventor said. "They were created to improve the world, not to make it a place of bloodshed." But powerful and greedy men do not listen to the likes of a poor inventor. And so they broke into his laboratory and stole his wonderful creatures and his clockwork men, and they beat the inventor senseless and left him for dead. "If you will not accept money, fame, or power, then you are a fool," the men said. "We are going to change the world." And change the world they did. The inventor did not die, though he was badly injured. Some days he wished he had perished, because it broke his heart to see what the men who stole his mechanical creatures made of them. Governments waged war without end, pitting clockwork soldiers on iron horses against each other in battles that never ended, fighting men that could not bleed. Steel dogs killed without remorse, wiping out villages and farms in their path. Criminals used mechanical monsters to terrorize cities and hunt down anyone who opposed them until no one was safe. Factories filled with metal men working around the clock, belching smoke and sending flames into the night sky. Outside their gates, the human workers and their families starved, their labor no longer needed. The inventor saw all of this and wept. "I have brought this on the world. I have failed my precious creatures and let them be enslaved. If anyone discovers that I am still alive, the powerful and greedy men will take me prisoner and make me invent more horrors for them. I cannot let this happen." So it was that the inventor went away to a secret place only he knew existed. On an island in the middle of the deep woods, far from cities or towns, he built himself a cabin and a workshop. Not all of his beautiful steam creatures had been lost to the profiteers, because he had already begun to move them, slowly and secretly, to his sanctuary in the forest. He had planted a garden to grow his food and had outfitted his laboratory with all the tools and materials he might need, intending to spend his old age tinkering. He planned his escape and slipped away one night, making certain to take with him or destroy any of his notes that might be used to exploit his inventions. But in his hurry, he forgot one of the notebooks. So that's where I'll stop, but it is our retelling of the Three Billy Goats Gruff. And that is, the story name is The Patented Troll, but it's in the Gaslight and Grimm Steampunk Fairy Tales anthology. So I'm going to bop to the modern era and pick up with Deadly Curiosities. Deadly Curiosities is set in modern-day Charleston, South Carolina. And my main character, Cassidy Kincaid, is a psychometric. She can read the history and magic of objects by touching them. And she and her allies save Charleston and the world from supernatural threats. So right now we have 2 full novels in that series, Deadly Curiosities and Vendetta. The 3rd novel, Tangled Web, is coming out later this year. And we have 2 collections of short stories, Trifles and Folly 1, which I have in the dealer room, and Trifles and Folly 2, which did not come in to have me have print copies, but it is available for order on print, in print and ebook. So this is one of the short stories, and let's see. This was actually the Christmas story because I wanted to give people a bloody good Christmas in Charleston. And it is Red Cap. It's in Trifles and Folly 2. It's also available, all the stories and novellas are available individually in ebook. So this is Red Cap. I ran through White Point Gardens as fast as I could. Behind me, teeth snapped and feet crunched on gravel. The Red Cap was gaining on me. I turned and caught a glimpse of the creature that was hunting me and let loose with a blast of cold white force from the athame in my right hand. The energy bolt sizzled through the air, but the Red Cap was gone. They're devilishly hard to hit. Mocking laughter came from the shadows. The Red Cap was enjoying his game. He was toying with me, letting me get ahead of him, saving his speed for the kill. Legend says it's impossible to outrun a Red Cap. I had hoped to draw him off, away from the homes that bordered on the garden, where there were fewer prying eyes and a lesser chance of collateral damage. I'd offered myself as bait to draw the Red Cap toward the waterfront. Now, I dodged around the statues and war memorial cannons, trying to outwit a bloodthirsty pixie with a taste for human flesh. Unfortunately, this wasn't the strangest way I've ever spent a Friday night. The Red Cap was chattering in excitement, stoked about getting a good feast. Me. I was predictably less enthusiastic about the possibility and determined to make sure he stayed hungry. The back corner of the park was coming up, where it was darker, thanks to a burned-out street lamp. Just a few more feet. The Red Cap gave a feral cry and sprang at me, snapping his sharp teeth on my jeans and barely missing my skin. I wheeled and gave him a good kick in the face, knocking him a few feet away. The Red Cap howled in anger and jumped to his feet, eyes fixed on me as he sized up his prey. A larger shape moved fast enough to blur, and in the next instant, Soren tackled the Red Cap. Soren hung on, using his own immortal strength to restrain the Red Cap, who, despite being 2 feet tall and built like a stringy old man, was as tough as a tiger. "Now!" Soren cried out. Teague darted from behind a monument. I heard the Red Cap scream as Teague pulled the creature's head back and swung his blade, neatly severing the vicious pixie's head. The Red Cap's body went limp in Soren's grip, but the mouth kept snapping even as the head fell to the ground, and its beady dark eyes glared at us balefully until the light finally left them. Soren dropped the headless body and stood up, wiping the worst of the pixie's blood from his shirt. Teague pulled a garbage bag from his backpack and scooped up the head and body to dispose of elsewhere. "Third damn Red Cap this week," Soren muttered. "Just another weekend here in the Holy City." I'm Cassidy Kincaid, and I own Trifles and Folly, an antique and curio shop in historic haunted Charleston, South Carolina. Obviously, we're not the average secondhand shop. I'm a psychometric, meaning I can read the history, magic, and emotional resonance of objects by touch. Teague Logan is my assistant store manager. He's got Weaver magic, which lets him weave spells into cloth or weave electronic threads into data, making him a wicked good hacker. Soren is my business partner, and he's also a nearly 600-year-old vampire who founded Trifles and Folly back in the 1600s. We work for the Alliance, a secret coalition of mortals and immortals who keep the world safe from dangerous magical and supernatural objects. When we succeed, no one notices. When we fail, lots of people die. The Red Cap wasn't the worst monster we had fought, not by a long shot. But Red Caps were still dangerous, as the sudden jump in the number of missing people in Charleston attested. The murderous pixie we battled tonight had friends out there, and they'd kill again unless we did something to stop them. Just in case someone noticed us running around, we left the park quickly and met up back at the store, gathering in the small break room. Teague handed off the bag with the dead Red Cap to Soren. "You'll take care of this one like the others?" he asked. Soren nodded. "I'll handle it." Soren's blonde hair was cut short, playing up his high cheekbones. He looks like he's in his mid-20s, though he's centuries older. "Where are all the Red Caps coming from?" Teague asked, as he checked my calf to make sure the pixie hadn't broken the skin. Lucky for me, I was just fast enough to escape those razor-sharp teeth. I poured us both a glass of sweet tea, and we toasted the success of tonight's hunt. "I don't know, but I'm never going to look at Santa's elves with their little red hats the same way again," I said, collapsing into a chair. Now that the danger was over, I felt a little weak in the knees. It was a week until Christmas, and Charleston was beset with ugly little evil pixies. There was nothing jolly about it. "I thought Red Caps were only in England and Scotland," I said, and took a sip of my tea. "There are a few things in life, even counting murderous elves, that can't be made a little better with a good glass of sweet tea." So that's been a lot of fun as a series to write. Of course, it's kind of a different thing to go from real places to fictitious places. In all the epic fantasy series, the kingdoms are completely of my own making. So I don't have to answer to anybody else going, "You got the history wrong on that. You can't get there from there." It doesn't take that long to drive from one place to another. But But when it's a real city and people live there, then everybody can come, and say, those two streets don't intersect. So you have to get your history right. And that's kind of a fun thing, working with the Pittsburgh area in the Iron and Blood and Storm and Fury books, the northwestern Pennsylvania area in Spell, Salt, and Steel, Charleston, because you do get to go and look at them. For Iron and Blood, Larry and I actually went to one of the cemeteries in Pittsburgh and blocked out a battle scene that takes place in that. Now, we did warn the tour guide, so she didn't call Homeland Security on us as we were dodging between monuments and going, okay, I got a line of sight here, so I could get a shot going this direction. This is what we do on family vacations. We take guided tours of cemeteries to set up battle strategies. And my two teenage kids were just going, oh God, they're at it again. So, welcome to my world. So, I want to make sure to touch on as many series as I can the time we have. And so I want to read this time from Chronicles of the Necromancer. That's the first of my epic fantasy series. The Summoner is the first book in that series. Action, magic, and a necromancer who's a good guy. Now, there are 6 books in the Chronicles series, but this year I am starting to write the 7th book. This new series will have 6 books in it. It'll be the Legacy of the Necromancer series, and it picks up 17 years after the end of the Dread. So there are repercussions to things that happened in the Chronicles series, and now those chickens are coming home to roost. So this is from the very beginning of that series, The Summoner. Walk carefully, my prince, the ghost warned. You're in great danger tonight. Outside the mullioned windows, Martris Drake could hear the revelry of the feast day crowds. Torchlight glittered beyond the glass, and costumed figures danced, singing and catcalling past the castle tower. Dressed in the 4 aspects of the one goddess, Margolin's sacred lady, the partygoers lurched behind an effigy of the crone mother, far more intent, this feast of the departed, on appeasing their appetite for ale than memorializing the dead. From whom? Triss returned his attention to the spectral visitor. The ghosts of the palace Shikarishet were so numerous that he could not recall ever having seen this particular spirit before, a thin-faced man with heavy-lidded eyes, whose antiquated costume marked him as a member of the court 100 years past. The spectre flickered and tried to say more, but no sound came. Triss leaned closer. Now, of any time, the ghost should be the easiest to see, for on haunts, as the feast day was commonly known, spirits walk openly abroad, and even skeptics cannot refuse to see. The palace ghosts had been Triss's friends since childhood, long before he came to understand that his insubstantial companions were not so easily seen by those around him. Spirits vanished, the fading ghost managed. Beware the soul catcher. Triss had to strain for the last words as the revenant faded into nothing. Puzzled, he sat back on his heels, his sword clattering against the hard stone floor. The rap at the door nearly made him lose his footing. What are you doing in there? Or aren't you alone? He banned Satirius through the door. The latch lifted and the sturdy captain of the guard strode in. Nothing in the young man's manner corroborated the strong smell of ale on his breath, save for his musk-brown hair and the slight rumpling of his fine tunic. I'm alone now, Triss said, with a glance back to where the ghost had been. Satirius looked from Triss to the empty wall. I keep telling you, Triss, the guardsman said, you gotta get out more. Me, I don't care if I ever talk to a ghost, unless she's a good-looking lass with a pint of ale. Triss managed to smile. Have you seen the spirits tonight? Satirius thought for a moment. Not as much as usual, now that you mention it, especially for haunts. He brightened. But you know how they love a good story. They're probably down listening to Caraway tell his tales. He pulled at Triss's sleeves. Come on, there's no law that says princes can't have fun too. And while I'm standing up here with you, I could be missing the love of my life down in the great room. Satirius's good humor made Triss chuckle. The captain of the guards was a favorite with the court's noble daughters. Satirius's light brown hair was cut short for a battle helm. He was a medium build, tanned and fit and tanned from training with the guards. Everything about his bearing and his manner bespoke his military background, but the mischievous twinkle in his dark eyes softened his features and seemed to make the marriageable maidens flock to him. Triss was just as happy to have those same young girls and their ambitious mothers distracted. He stood a head taller than Satirius, with a lean, rangy build. He had been told often that his angular features and high cheekbones took after the best of both his parents, but the white blonde hair that framed his face and fell to his shoulders was clearly from Queen Ceri's side, as were the green eyes that matched those of his grandmother, the famed sorceress Baba Ka. It was a combination the ladies of the court found quite attractive. "I promise I'll be down right behind you," Tris said, and Satirius raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Honest, I just want to light a candle and put a gift in Grandmother's room before I go. Then you can take me on that tour of alehouses you've been promising." Satirius grinned. "I'll hold you to that, Prince Drake," he laughed. "Get moving. The way the festival's going tonight, they'll run out of ale, and you know that Brandy doesn't agree with me." Tris heard his friend's bootsteps fade down the corridor as he made his way to the family room. The silent stares from a row of paintings and tapestries seemed to follow him. The long-dead kings of Margolem, King Bryson's forebears. Bryson's lineage was one of the longest unbroken monarchies in the Seven Kingdoms. Glancing at their solemn visages and knowing the stories of what they had endured to secure their thrones, Tris was glad the crown would not pass to him. He picked up a torch from the sconce on the wall and opened the door into his grandmother's room. The smell of incense and potions still clung to the sorceress's chamber 5 years after her death. Tris shut the door behind him. It was an indication of the awe with which even her own family regarded her, that even now no one disturbed the spirit mage's possessions. But the sorceress Baba Ka earned that kind of awe, and though he remembered her most clearly as an indulgent grandmother, the legends of her power were enough to make him hesitate just an instant before stepping further into the room. "Grandmother?" Tris whispered. He set a candle on the table in the center of the room and lit it with a straw from the torch. Then he set out a token gift of honey cakes and a small cup of ale, over which he made the sign of the goddess in blessing. And then, with a glance to assure himself that the door was shut and he would not be discovered, he stepped onto the braided rug in the center of the room. "Grandmother, I call you," he murmured, stretching out his senses for her familiar presence. "I invite you to the feast. Join me within the circle." Tris paused, but for the first time since her death, no response came. He tried once more. "Baba Ka, your kinsman invites you to the feast. I've brought you a gift. Walk with me." Nothing in the room stirred, and Tris opened his eyes, concerned. And then a glimmer of light caught his eye. It seemed far beyond the circle, struggling and flickering as if trapped within God. But as he strained to make it out, he recognized the form of his grandmother, standing at a great distance obscured by fog. "Grandmother," he called, but the apparition came no further. Her lips moved, but no sound reached him. Yet a chill ran down his back. He did not need words to recognize a warning in his grandmother's manner. Though Tris could not hear Baba Ka's voice, the indication of danger was clear enough. A cold wind howled through the shuttered chamber, guttering the torch and extinguishing the candle. It buffeted the circle Tris cast, and the image of his grandmother winked out. 2 porcelain figures crashed to the floor, and the bed curtains fluttered as the gust tore scrolls from the desk and knocked a chair to the ground. Tris gritted his teeth and strained to keep his warding in place, but he felt the goose flesh rise in his arms as the chill permeated even the area within the cordoned circle. Like a glimmer of something there and gone, impressions formed in his mind. Something evil, something old and strong, lost, hunting, dangerous. And then as quickly as it came, the wind was gone, and with it Tris's sense of foreboding. When he felt sure nothing stirred in the room, Tris raised his shaking hand to silently thank the 4 faces of the goddess, and then closed the circle, shivering as the magic faded in his mind. He looked around the room. Only the torn parchments, shattered figurines, and overturned chair testified that anything was amiss. More troubled than before, Tris turned to leave. From the corridor, a woman screamed. Tris bounded for the door, his sword already in hand. In the shadows of the hallway, Tris could make out a grappling pair, the dark figure of a man looming over one of the chambermaids who struggled to escape. "Release her!" Tris raised his sword in challenge. Seizing the moment, the terrified woman sank her teeth into her attacker's arm and wrenched free, running down the corridor for her life. Tris felt his throat tighten as the assailant straightened and turned, recognizing the form even before the thin gold circlet on the man's brow glinted in the torchlight. "Once again you've spoiled my fun, brother." Jared Drake glowered, his eyes narrowing. King Bryson's eldest son started down the hallway, and Tris could tell by his brother's gait that Jared was well into his cups this feast night. Tris stood his ground, although he felt his heart in his throat. Ale never compromised Jared's swing, nor blunted his swordsmanship, and Tris had taken enough bruises at his brother's hand to know just what kind of a mood Jared was in tonight. "You're drunk," Tris grated. "Sober enough to whip your ass," Jared retorted, already beginning to turn up the sleeves on his tunic. "You can try." "You dare to raise steel against me?" Jared roared. "I could have you hanged! No one threatens the future king of Margolem." "While father rules, I doubt I'll hang," Tris replied, feeling his heart thud. "Why don't you bed one of the noble's daughters instead of raping the servants? Or would it be too expensive to pay off their families when they disappeared?" I'll teach you respect, Jared growled, close enough for Tris to smell the rancid brew on his breath. And with the movement almost too quick to see, Jared drew his sword and charged forward. Tris parried, needing both hands to deflect the thrust he had no doubt was meant to score. He fell back a step as Jared drove on, barely countering his brother's enraged attack. Jared pressed forward, and the anger that burned in his eyes was past reasoning. Tris fought for his life, knowing he could not hold off Jared's press much longer, as Jared forced him back into the glow of the torch spots. In the distance, boot steps sounded on the stone. "Prince Jared?" Zakar the seneschal called. "My prince, are you there? Your father desires your attendance." With an oath, Jared freed his sword from Tris's parry and stepped back several paces. "Prince Jared?" Zakar called again, closer now, and more insistent. "I heard you," Jared shouted in return, watching Tris carefully. Warily, Tris lowered his sword, but did not sheath it until Jared first replaced his own blade. "Don't think it's settled, brother," Jared snarled. "You'll pay. Before the dawn, you'll pay." And that's the beginning of the Chronicles of the Necromancer. How much time do we have?
About 3 or 4 minutes.
3 or 4 minutes? Okay.
Or you can just wrap up now later.
Okay. Let me give you a short one from, if I've got 3 or 4 minutes, then I'm going to go for the first book of the Ascending Kingdom saga. This is from Ice Forge. And
Excuse me.
so this is short. This has to end. Blaine McFadden looked at his sister Mary, huddled in the bed, covers drawn up to her chin. She was sobbing hard enough that it nearly robbed her of breath, and leaning against Aunt Judith, who murmured consolations. Just 16, Mary looked small and lost. A vivid bruise marked one cheek. She struggled to hold her nightgown together where it had been ripped down the front. "You're upsetting her more." Judith cast a reproving glance his way. "I'm upsetting her. Father's the one to blame for this, that drunken son of a bitch." Blaine's right hand opened and closed, itching for the pommel of his sword. "Blaine," Judith's voice warned him off. "After what he did, you stand up for him?" Judith McFadden Ainsworth raised her head to meet his gaze. She was a thin, handsome woman in her middle years, and when she dressed for court, it was still possible to see a glimpse of the beauty she had been in her youth. Tonight, she looked worn. "Of course not. I'm sick of his rages, sick of being beaten when he's on one of his binges." Judith's lips quirked. "You've been too tall for him to beat for years now." At 20 years old and a few inches over 6 feet tall, Blaine stood a hand's breadth taller than Lord McFadden. While he had his mother's dark chestnut hair, his blue eyes were a matching color and determination to his father's. Blaine had always been secretly pleased that while he resembled his father enough to avoid questions of paternity in build and features, he took after his mother's side of the family. He was no longer the small, thin boy his father caned for the slightest infraction. "He killed our mother when she got between him and me. He took his temper out on my hide until I was tall enough to fight back. He started beating Carr when I got too big to thrash. I had to put his horse down after he'd beaten it and broken its legs. Now this, it has to stop." "Blaine, please." Judith turned, and Blaine could see tears in her eyes. "Anything you do will only make it worse." "I'll kill that son of a bitch," Blaine muttered, turning and sprinting down the hall. "Blaine, don't! He took the stairs at a run. Above the fireplace in the parlor hung 2 broadswords, weapons that had once belonged to his grandfather. Blaine snatched down the lowest broadsword. Its grip felt heavy and familiar in his hand. "Master Blaine!" Edward followed him into the room. The elderly man was alarmed as his gaze fell from Blaine's face to the weapon in his hand. "Where is he?" "Who, my lord?" Blaine caught Edward by the arm, and Edward shrank back from his gaze. "My horse-spawned father, that's who. Where is he?" "Master Blaine, I beg you, where?" He's headed for the garden. He had his pipe with him. Blaine headed for the manor's front entrance at a dead run. Judith was halfway down the stairs. "Blaine, think about this! Blaine!" He flung open the door so hard that it crashed against the wall and ran down the manor's sweeping stone steps. A full moon lit the sloping lawn well enough for Blaine to make out the figure of a man in the distance, strolling down the carriage lane. The smell of his father's pipe smoke wafted back to him, as hated as the odor of camphor that always clung to Lord McFadden's clothing. Blaine did not. Lord Ian McFadden narrowed his eyes as he saw the sword in Blaine's hand. "Go back inside, boy. Don't make me hurt you." Blaine did not slow down or lower his sword. "Why? Why, Mary?" There's no shortage of court whores. Why marry? Lord McFadden's face reddened. Because I can. Now drop the sword if you know what's good for you. Blaine's blood thundered in his ears. In the distance, he could hear Judith screaming his name. I guess this cur needs to be taught a lesson. Lord McFadden swung at Blaine with enough force to have shattered his skull if Blaine had not ducked the heavy rake. McFadden gave a roar and swung again, but Blaine lurched forward, taking the blow on his shoulder to get inside McFadden's guard. The broadsword sank hilt deep into the man's chest, slicing through his waistcoat. Lord McFadden's body shuddered, and he dropped the rake. He met Blaine's eyes. Didn't think you had it in you, he gasped. Behind him, Blaine could hear footsteps pounding on the cobblestones. He heard panicked shouts and Judith scream. Nothing mattered to him, nothing at all except the ashen face of his father. Master Blaine, what have you done? Selden, the groundskeeper, was the first to reach the scene. Blaine's grip tightened on the sword in his hand. Something someone should have done years ago. And that starts the Ascending Kingdom saga, which is post-apocalyptic medieval epic fantasy. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the sampler pack, and please stay for Stuart. I think you're next up. So thank you very much. I'm Gail Z Martin. You can find me in the event.